potential friends and adventurers. I'm Em, and today we're going to talk about something really unique. We are going to talk about triumph, a core of writing every plot. Welcome to the DM table. Also, I welcome all the potential writers that want to be here now, because this is one simple trick, and yet look at what it will do for every plot that you want to write, and something that will clarify many things. Many times we want a plot for a book or a movie or a game to be better, and yet it is a great mystery on how to properly satisfy audience with story. So here is something that I have noticed after lots of thought, and that is that it's all about triumph. Every junction of a story should be a triumph in its own right. Every chapter, everything that happens should be a triumph of its own. Now, hear me out before you wonder how this is even possible, let alone usable. Firstly, this could be a triumph of something else, not necessarily the protagonists or the world or even anything else that you would immediately name. It can be a triumph of circumstance. It can be a triumph of tragedy. How is something a triumph of tragedy? Well, what I mean by triumph here is that something is so great, so effective, so powerful that people would call it either a triumph or an act of fate. That it stands as a powerful entity on its own, that it contributes powerfully to the story by demonstrating something that can happen in the world and is powerful so much that not only focuses attention of the audience, but vindicates why something happened. You know, the magnitude explains why it was done, why something was harder to avoid, why something was strived towards. Even if it's mistaken, it's sort of triumph of folly, because it was done, yet it shouldn't have been done, but it was done so powerfully that it ended up working. So, as I said, any junction of the story should be a triumph. It could be a triumph of folly, triumph of circumstance, triumph of whatever it is, but it should be unmistakably a triumph. This, by itself, makes for a well-established and well-explained story. How come it's also well-explained? Well, if things are so clear emotionally, then people find their own answers frequently. I'm not saying that you shouldn't explain your plot, but as I said, if emotion is so strong, people will theorize and come up with some answers. If your story is reasonably logical, people will find logical and realistic answers why something happened. They will be able to find motives, they'll be able to find means, and they'll most of all be able to find motivations, because triumph inspires. Even a wrong triumph inspires fear and caution. It can inspire people trying to keep themselves safe from such a thing happening, therefore thinking. You know, crunching it inside their head, thinking up a solution. So, triumph indeed creates something unmistakable. It creates motive in the audience to figure it out, to learn from example, to follow your characters, to follow your world. And why is this so? Well, I have listened to other people talk about how humans transfer information from one to another. They disregard the things that are, well, unnecessary to survival, to success. They want to listen to stuff that tells them how stuff is done, how stuff is conquered, how stuff works, what explodes, what doesn't, what should they be careful of, and what should they feel safe about, because that they feel, even subconsciously, that they feel gives them power. It gives them upgrades. It sort of up levels their program, and so humans listen to information about trial and conquest, and especially of triumph, no matter what that triumph is. Whether it was something funny or something serious is less the matter than that it was resounding, that it had unmistakable impact. And how do we know this? Well, something happened that was logically explainable to important people or things, for perhaps important reasons. Important reasons can be emotional, they don't have to be material. But as long as big things happen to big people, that's your guarantee of valid information that people want to absorb. However, these things should look as fitted as possible, therefore, as I said earlier, some things are emotionally big, for, say, purely personal reasons. After all, people do want to know about how to get personal fulfillment. Some things are spiritually big, some philosophically big, some materialistically big. Some other things are big due to understanding in the moment, as in they're thought of as big and explanation will later show them as less so, but the way things played out, people invested lots of power, lots of action, lots of thought. Therefore, the event was supposedly big and it ended up being big. So, if we have so realistically laid out differences in how our big events are big to our protagonists and audience, then we won't make a classical mistake of having millions of Mary Sue attributes surrounding either our world or our protagonists or something else in our story. Because now we have both variants in scale and variants in angle of approach. We don't just try to demolish it with first thing that comes to mind. That's the kind of big we want, big from all different points of interest. This, of course, creates freedom because all of these opposing triumphs create duality and they create competing sides, and people, indeed, because of that nature of transferring information, do want to watch competitions, races. They want to see who won and why. What were they doing better? In which things were they better and how? They want to learn their skills. They want to absorb their angles of approach. And if we have many of these dualities, many of these triumphs, many of these plots that lead to explanations, we will have lots of freedom for our viewers, for our players, for whoever we are presenting this to, because that's how they'll be able to choose. That's how they'll be able to pick through the treasure trove. That's how they'll be able to inspire themselves to find their own answers and their own stories within the labyrinth of competing triumphs of life. And finally, those triumphs of life, or your story, they should remain open to interpretation. Not intentionally vague, not at all. In fact, they should be potentially very clear, but how are they open to interpretation then is by you not either defending them or mitigating them. Just leave them there as pillars of their own happening. They could have been villainous or good or both at the same time, because players can think for themselves which of these. And it should be so that each triumph stands on its own, so therefore players can wonder about whether they should judge negatively, positively, what they should think, and it's good to have room for interpretation so that those who love to make a conclusion that's not ambiguous can, and those who love to make a conclusion that's ambiguous can as well, because people will think about this and you want them to be able to make their own conclusions, yet things should play out logically further from pillar to pillar, creating a realistic web of events that proceeds the story further. So goes for your protagonists, and perhaps for your players as well, if you have good players and you're willing to let them think about their actions. So, adventurer, if you thought this was unique, maybe you can spare me a click and I could see you here next and perhaps every week. Until then, I wish you luck on your adventures, and if you have something, write to me in the comments. I am all ears and eyes over here. See you then. Bye.